Greetings, humans, Daleks, Time Lords, and Midnight Entities. You're listening to Exterminating Doctor Who.
This is the show that takes Doctor Who's most talked about episodes to debate if they're as good or as bad as their reputations.
With your hosts, Aidan Gula.
And me, George Ellis.
And in today's episode, we are talking about Midnight, joined by Joel Johnson.
Hi, you're right, guys.
Hello.
Hey!
Nice to see you.
A guest. Quite different. This isn't
Yes.
This isn't quite series 1 and it isn't quite series 2.
No.
We're just doing these like
I'm in this weird grey area right now.
Yeah,
Like, I'm in limbo, I feel like.
special. There are special episodes because, you know, if you've listened to their last 20 episodes, they were all bad, quote unquote, episodes. So you'd be like, why on earth are you talking about Midnight? That's like one of the best, if not the best. But it's because we're switching up our theme. For series 2, we're going to be doing the best episodes. So this is our little bridge in between the two.
Little interlude to help you adjust to the second
Really?
series.
I mean, because it is, you've said, Joel, it is your favorite episode, is it not?
Absolutely. I stand by the statement that it is the best Doctor Who story ever written. Classic series, new series, Big Finish, all encompassed. I think it's the best, if not just my favorite in general, because obviously the subjective opinions, but I can say wholeheartedly it is at least my favorite, and I view it as the best ever made.
Yeah,
for reasons we're going to get into.
This is a strong opinion because we always make a distinction between best and favorite on here a lot. But for you, it is both best and favorite.
Exactly.
So it's a strong thing to say, that is. So as we did with our kind of previous guest that we had before ish, when we had Will from the Spin the Wheel podcast on, we asked him kind of just the general, how did you get into Doctor Who? Well, we know what your favorite episode is. Who's your favorite Doctor? Those kind of, give us your Doctor Who fan profile, Joel.
My Doctor Who fan profile, I'd say my first exposure to Doctor Who was in the year 2005 when I was 4 years old. And I remember strangely, quite vividly, for a 4-year-old, walking into my parents' kitchen and seeing on the TV that we had in the corner, like the old small box TV, the scene from Rose where she was like walking in the warehouse and the mannequins start coming to life, like right before Eccleston shows up for the first time. And I remember just the image of these shop window mannequins like approaching her just scared me so much that I ran out of the room. Like I never got into it after that because I was just like, I'm not watching that. It scares me too much. But then for some reason, I think it was either Christmas 2006 when it originally aired or a few months after, I walked into my dad's study, and on the TV in this study, he was showing or he was watching The Runaway Bride, specifically the scene where the Rachnos appears for the first time. And then as like a 5 or 6-year-old, that captivated me immediately. I was like, whoa, this is what kind of show is this? You know, like I was immediately just hooked by that. And then 2007 onwards, I was just like a diehard fan. Like series 3 with Martha Jones and obviously David Tennant's The 10th Doctor was like my proper jumping on point, and I will always hold that series in particular in such high regard because of just the nostalgia. But yeah, ever since then, every Doctor, every series, I've gone back to the classic series. I've absorbed a lot of Big Finish, and yeah, I've been a diehard fan of the franchise ever since. And in regards to my favorite Doctor, it's got to be David Tennant's 10th Doctor, just for the one nostalgia reasons, but also
I assumed as much.
Yeah, obviously
You are correct there, Joel. And I do like how
I'm outnumbered.
But you're less outnumbered. You're just wrong. But when it comes to Doctor Who, I do like how your starting off point is being scared
twice.
And
Walking in and being scared twice. It's like
yeah.
And
well,
I think that's what Doctor Who
I
does
say I
best.
was less scared by the Rachnos and more just kind of like, obviously, like I'd grown by like 2 more years at that point, and I just remember thinking this time around, whoa, like that looks incredible. As a kid, you know, like, whoa, it's this giant red spider woman, you know, and there's a woman in a wedding dress and a man in a suit who talks science, and I was like, what on earth am I watching? And I just couldn't look away, really. So like, yeah,
weird monsters bring you on board with Doctor Who.
exactly.
Yes.
It's part of the appeal.
I mean, it's good. My first memory, my first clear memory is of the Reapers in Father's Day. So I guess it's the same thing as being like, what is going on? This is terrifying. I don't like this.
Definitely. But like I said, I did jump on around 2007. So I remember my parents would get me they would go to like Woolworths every now and again and get me those old like volume DVDs, like the Eccleston and David Tennant's first series, and I'd catch up out of order in the year 2007. Like I just get whatever DVD they would get me, and that's how I watched Eccleston and Tennant's first series as a kid. But yeah, I've got fond memories of that, really.
I mean, the biggest thing about that is I completely forgot Woolworths was even a thing.
Yeah, you know, like they just sell these
That's
like
a massive
volume
throwback.
Yeah, they would separate Eccleston and Tennant's first series into like these 5-volume DVDs, and I just get like one every now and again, and never in the right order. And I'd just be like, one week I'd be like watching Love and Monsters, and the next I'd be watching Father's Day, you know, just like in that order. Which was a strange way to absorb it as a kid, but it didn't change the experience at all.
It's such a weird time, the time of volumes instead of box sets. What were they thinking? Let's give you a couple of episodes and then good luck finding the rest.
Exactly.
I don't get it, but
yeah,
that's Christ. I don't remember. I probably mentioned my first introduction to Doctor Who, but I don't remember mine. It's brilliant that you can remember your exact first introduction and every moment there. That's brilliant because
it was the fear. Obviously the Rose one, it was the fear sort of like burned that memory into my brain of just like being like, oh no, I don't like this, like running out the room. these shop window dummies are chasing a blonde woman like in a scary room. I'm running away. This is scaring me too much. It's just like I've been fixated on that memory ever since, I suppose. You know, it was only long after I had sort of like for lack of a better term, the Rachnos encounter, that I even made the connection that those were the same show, because obviously none of the cast members were the same. You know, obviously when I then got the DVD and popped it in and I watched like Rose again for the first time properly, I was like, oh, I never knew that this was the same show that scared me all those years ago, you know? So thought that was great.
Oh, that's quite a similar cast, isn't it?
Somebody should tell that other show. Copying them.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
basically the same show.
Strange.
But they've changed the actor.
Defamation.
Like the main guy, he's got a longer. What's going on here? Yeah. You should write a letter to BBC. They need to sue. This is grounds.
Sue for Yeah, exactly. They've been ripping them off.
A lot of people will be, you traumatized me as a child. I want money as a result.
Yeah, pay for the damages.
I mean, that's Doctor Who, though. It's got to scare you. I mean,
exactly.
As I've said, I've definitely spoken about my first introduction to Doctor Who on the first episode, but right now I can't remember that for the life of me. But what I can remember is that Doctor Who would always scare me as a kid, and that's part of why I kept coming back.
I was going to say that I think this conversation we're having about like what moments of Doctor Who as a child particularly are quite scared us is fitting, given that we're going to talk about an episode that I just said are quite frightening on the whole, like a genuinely chilling episode of the show.
It is, yeah. So we shall hop straight into that in the form of Midnight
Train.
As I wrote, Midnight Train, as you call it. You can never remember the actual name of this episode, but something I wrote down, talking about how scary it is. Something I wrote down was, it's amazing that they made a woman sat on the floor terrifying, and I think that just kind of that's this episode summed up. It's a woman sat on the floor, and yet we're all terrified of it.
Yeah, definitely. It's just incredibly effective at everything it tries to get across.
I think that's down to her acting as well. There's a huge part of how she conveys that. First off, you're introduced to this character, and she's she's not warm. She's a bit cold towards the Doctor, but she warms to him, and you see her as a human being, and then suddenly she's sitting on the floor doing these weird alien things, and it's almost as if she's not there, or she's a husk of a person, and that's the fear, because you've seen what she's like before. It's not just a brand new character. And then I think the acting from, I don't know her name, unfortunately. Do you guys know what her name is?
Leslie Sharp.
Leslie Sharp.
Who plays Sky Silvestry. That's the
Yes.
character's name.
And she's wonderful. And I'd say without her, this episode probably wouldn't have worked.
In preparation for this, I watched the confidential cut downs included on the Blu-ray for Midnight, and the process of like recording or like filming the lines or the scenes where Sky is repeating people was quite interesting, and what they had to do to like get it exactly, because the whole point is that the intonations and the inflections are like on point depending on like who she's repeating. Just involved having the actors sort of stand behind the camera in front of a teleprompter saying the lines, and then the actress Leslie Sharp would say the lines in the exact same way.
Mhm.
Like would she try and capture them with the exact same inflection and intonation, which I just found quite an interesting process. And then in the edit, they would put those recordings together.
Yes.
So
they record all of the lines separately. They'd do that, but what they do is they'd have each one recorded completely separately on a different audio track. So when they comes to putting it in the edit, they're not fighting over whether or not it's not synced up, because they can make sure it's perfect. It's technically it seems like this would be a cheap episode because it's one location, and it is quite a cheap episode, but the amount of effort they had to put in the post, in the edit, is probably more than they do for most of the episodes when it comes to the sound design.
Yeah, it's a budget episode, like used to its most effectiveness. I think, you know, like in terms of like concept, narrative, characters, the sort of, like you said, the whole like keeping it in one room, you know, is used so effectively to create just like this overlying sense of like claustrophobia and paranoia that is present throughout the entire piece, and it works so well. And big statement, it's the best script that RTD has ever written, or ever, or well, at least for Doctor Who, because I know he's like doing some stuff with Big Finish now, ever will write. Just putting that out there, really.
And considering it was so rushed as well, that like it's the case of they just had an episode to fill. They had no money, but they basically had no money. Catherine Tate was busy, and they were like, "What can we do?" So he just wrote Midnight so quickly.
Yeah,
and yet it's like such a good script. Where it's like I'm sure you could go into some like real deep analysis of how this it represents hysteria and paranoia in society and all these kind of things, pointing the blame and all this kind of stuff. And it's like you came up with that in like probably a week.
Really? That's what I say.
Right there. You're right there, and it does have like a lot of themes of like stuff like that, and with like particularly hysteria in like modern society. We live in the society, because basically I'd say there are a lot of lines in particular in the scripts that are present in the final cut of the episode that I'm going to make the statement here, if they were in a modern day Chibnall episode, people would throw their hands up in the air and say, "Oh God, like Doctor Who's gone off the deep end. They've like gone woke and rubbish like that." Some few examples are the painting of the mother character. I can't remember her name. You know, sort of Merlin's mom, as a very
Merlin's
kind of
mom,
Merlin's mom.
And my notes just says it's Merlin.
Yeah, exactly. Merlin's mom, because I can't remember the character's name, as a very kind of xenophobic individual, using for like being quick to like throw people out, saying phrases like they've got the same eyes, and like reference to the Doctor and Sky, which they just don't. Like they've like sort of the conclusion she comes to phrases like "it'll be you next" in reference to Dee Dee, who's objecting to throwing the Doctor out in the end, or the hostess using phrases like "ladies and gentlemen" and variations thereupon. If any of these were in a Chibnall script nowadays, or like a
there's
Jodie
also
Whittaker
the bit
episode,
I thought the same thing in the bit where the Doctor goes, "I'm just a traveller," and then Merlin's mom goes, "What, like an immigrant?"
exactly.
And I thought that
line is so impactful and paints such a picture of who this person is, like deep down, like when put under pressure. But it is literally a case of, if it was in a modern episode, people would like have a tantrum about it, which is insane and shows just like a very strange double standard. To me at least.
But I think it's very important that it has this in this episode as well, because what it's doing is it's obviously showing that that's what people can be like, and it's trying to it's almost a case study in a sense, and kind of it's a, do you know what, you get what I'm getting at? There's a phrase for it, but I can't remember what it is. But I also think it's not just the xenophobia that this episode is doing. I don't think it's just I'll say that again. Sorry. I don't think it's just the trying to show the characters are deep down evil and that kind of thing. I don't think it's just trying to do that, because there's an interesting moment, I know we're jumping around here, later on in the episode, where when the aliens kind of take on the Doctor's voice, that moment where she's speaking about how what the alien did is kind of put in ideas into their mind and that kind of thing. I think that's what's happening later on in the episode, rather than it just being they've just turned on the Doctor because he's an alien. I think that is a part of it, and it's an important message to put across that xenophobia is wrong, because then you're going to murder someone. But it's also the alien is amplifying what they're doing there, and she's twisting them. So there is an element there of it being the alien is the bad guy. It's not just humans being bad. but also, would she have been able to amplify their emotions if they weren't deep down that kind of thing? It's all
So
got a
what
lot
they're-
more layers to it.
Something you don't see in Doctor Who very often is the worst of humanity. Like, you tend to get in a base under siege style script, you tend to have the good people, then there's that one that's like, "Rrr," and he ends up getting killed off anyway.
The
What you
Troughton story,
what you very rarely ever see is the entire group are all that person rejecting the Doctor's help. I can't think of any other story where they've completely rejected his help.
It's,
Like,
it's quite fascinating in that like no person on that train is 100% good. Like
Yeah.
even the people who go out of their way to sort of like defend the Doctor in the end, or like the hostess who sacrificed herself for the climax of the whole thing. Like early on, when they're first discussing the prospect of chucking someone out, she's on board with that, like completely. Like she's like, let's throw out Sky, because she's scared along with the rest of them. And in the end, like what's quite interesting about the script is that fear brings out the worst in all of them.
Mhm.
And I just find that quite fascinating. No one is 100% good, and it creates for a more interesting dynamic between the characters and the way they interact with each other.
Yeah, I think that's it, because it's like I was saying, it's like whenever a crew, let's just call them, are resistant to the Doctor's help in any story, by the end of it, they always come around and they go, "Oh, this guy's going to help us." But in this one, they don't, and it very much, like you said, it represents this is the worst. This is humanity at its worst, because they're not even cooperating. Nobody's working with each other. Everybody's blaming each other. It's like there's no. If the Doctor wasn't there, they'd have been dead within.
Yeah, God knows what would have happened to them, literally.
Yeah.
Well, if the Doctor wasn't there, would Sky have been able to latch onto anything? Because she chose the Doctor because he's the smartest.
I believe she would have gone for the next most intelligent being, which would be David Troughton, I believe is the actor, Patrick Troughton's son, funnily enough, who plays that character. The Professor, or Dee Dee, mainly, because like there seems to be like this underlying thing that Dee Dee is incredibly intelligent, but for his own ego or whatever reason, the Professor is like constantly patronizing her and putting her down. It's quite sort of like underplayed near the beginning, but as it goes on by the end, there's like this big outburst where he's just like shut up to her, which is just quite telling about the way he treats her or views her. But yeah, I would say, by the way, that this thing I was saying about no one on that train is 100% good, quite interestingly also extends to the Doctor. It's one of the few stories where the Doctor's fascination with alien life or the unknown in this, or arrogance for that matter, in this case incriminates him, or at least it's taken in the worst way by everyone around him. And I just find that dynamic quite fascinating, mostly because it's just not portrayed that often.
Yeah, because it's a case of like, because it's the worst of humanity, it shows that even the Doctor can't even bring them around to this, because they're rejecting his help, but even he is like, he's so fixed on, well, what is this, what can I do, that suddenly that it seems like, are you involved here? Because you're not actually helping us, and whatever you say here isn't going to stop us. Because it even makes that speech about, could you really kill her, would you really do that? And they were like, well, yeah, we would actually. And it's like, even the Doctor can't inspire these people to change, because he himself is so fixated on what it could be, that then they think, well, you're part of this anyway, so why would we listen to what you've got to say? And it's a very interesting thing that we don't really ever see, and I can't think of any other example where we have seen that.
I agree with all of this, how it's interesting that we're seeing this, but what I want to just say is when it comes to them turning against the Doctor to a point where it's actually a problem, that really only happens when Sky is controlling, or like she's in control there. So I'm very much leaning into the fact that she's definitely got a huge influence there, because she can do stuff with minds. She can do something there. She's got to be influencing them to a point. So it is the worst of humanity, yes, and she's bringing out that worst of humanity. But I don't want to put this 100% on them, because they were relatively understanding, and even the ones that were understanding, they turn for no other reason than they've suddenly changed their mind. But I don't think that's right. I don't think they can just change their mind to be against the Doctor. I know his fascination is probably bad here, but that's never usually a bad
But
thing.
she's never in control. She's never in control of those people.
No, not in control, but
control, but she
she's
manipulates.
influencing them heavily. and she
I'd
even
say-
says she is.
But
I'd
it's
say,
a case
like-
of she's bringing it out of them. She's not
Yeah.
causing them to do that.
No.
That is still their nature. She's
I'd
just
say-
bringing that nature to the forefront.
The most important thing about that, what you just said, George, is that obviously you're saying that they're quite sort of understanding of the Doctor early on before this entity like makes its way into the episode. But the only
fear.
reason like they're in any way like friendly to him is because they seemingly don't know anything about him, or they just assume that he's like them. You know, like it's only when they start to like sort of catch on that he's an alien, you know, or in that woman's words, like an immigrant, that they start to turn on him, you know, which I find quite like they're only friendly to him when they just are left to assume that he's like them, you know, which I find quite interesting.
And when he's like messing around with the control board as well, that's when they're like, wait, what are you doing? That's not we're not doing that. So you're not like us. So what are you doing?
Yeah, no, I all of these elements of it being the message and all that kind of thing and how it's bringing out the worst of them, I agree with it. But I don't want to put the 100% blame on the people, because yes, it's bringing out what they really are. But the idea with the circuit board and all that kind of thing, Sky is mentioning that, and Sky is usually the first one to mention these things.
I'm talking before that though, because she does that when she stands
But
up.
often people are confused by what the Doctor's doing in that instance. But in that instance, when he was doing that, they didn't suddenly in that moment decide to throw him out. They weren't like, you mess with the circuit board, out you go. You went in the cabin, out you go. Often he's having to deal with some abrasion from the characters, yes. But is he, yes, he's not having to deal with this to this extent, no. And this is the first time, and it's quite fascinating seeing that. But I really want to put some influence on the fact the alien is heavily involved in influencing these people. And okay, yes, she can't, maybe she's not controlling them directly, but she is involved in that. And there are aspects of the episode which basically tell you that outright. And I just find that very interesting.
But anything what you were saying where when she says anything though, they do come after the scene where he's going, you couldn't kill somebody, you couldn't do that. Until that point, she's not sentient in the sense that she's saying things, because at that point she's still only repeating and copying and then syncing. It's not until after that, when now the Doctor has been muted, that's when she starts to explicitly influence them.
Yeah. Well, she actually, I feel what I see there is the moment. Why does she single out the Doctor? I think that's because the alien believes that he's the main threat. And then what she's doing is she's pushing everyone to kick him out, because once he's gone, they will be... If the Doctor gets kicked out, it'll just be her living in Sky's body for the rest of the time. They won't fight that because they want... Yes, because they want to believe, like the people, they want to believe that the Doctor's the bad guy. They want someone to blame, and Sky's giving them that by making it the Doctor. And I think there's a lot of influence of them, of what you're saying, the people being bad. They are. Because, I mean, those main three, they just piss me off. But they're not good people. And I agree with you there. But then I think they're being pushed to going the extra extreme by the alien, because the alien realizes that the Doctor is the main threat and wants them out of there. And that's just what I find interesting. Because what I've written here in my notes is...
It also just shows that, though, even when they're in the heat of the moment, they're at their worst of potential.
Oh, yeah.
But even when it's all over and they're all safe, and the woman goes, well, I knew it was always her all along anyway.
I love the Doctor's...
That line hits so hard.
It's like, well, no, you didn't. You're just jumping out. You were saying, I knew it was the Doctor all along. And now you're saying it was her all along. It's like, no, shut up, love, because you are clearly, you're the worst of this entire group, really. Merlin's mum.
Well, so, I think the dad's worse, because he's actually the one trying to get the Doctor out the thing.
But is it not in a response to her?
But she's kind of like...
I mean, someone could tell me... No. Someone could tell me to murder someone, but if I then murder them, I'm just as much as at fault, But it's
they're not a good couple.
She is very much...
I don't think, no.
She is very much, you can tell in the dialogue, she's very much like putting the pressure on him and like manipulating him to like, yeah, exactly. Like she's trying to sort of be like, oh, do it. What are you doing? Like sort of like just trying to egg him on almost,
I know what the alien does to everyone.
Yeah, there's
I
very
find it
much a
interesting.
parallel there. I'd say, going on to like another topic, I'd say it's like quite an interesting episode in that it's like a spin on the kind of very overused base under siege format seen in like classic Who in particular that is not done quite regularly. In that, like, once again, like in typical base under siege stories, the Doctor and companion arrive in a location, they see a problem. There's like typically like one group that's being sort of like antagonized by another group, and then the Doctor comes along and helps save the day by the end of it, and everything's wrapped up quite nicely, and it's a big old happy ending. In this one, the Doctor doesn't save the day. The Doctor in the end is just lucky that things ended up working out the way they did, and the people aren't good, and it's this unknown threat that you never find out the backstory to, which is amazing. And I'm so happy, like, to this day there's not been some form of extended media or like a Moffat or Chibnall episode that have tried to like sort of like give a backstory to what this thing even was. It works so much more effectively if
Yeah,
you don't know where it comes from. You don't
I
know
was
why it's doing
thinking
the
that.
thing it does.
Yeah, I was thinking that because when I was watching, obviously I've been listening to so much Big Finish at the moment. I was looking at this, thinking this could very easily be a Big Finish episode because you've just got people sat around talking. And then I thought they could, if they wanted, do a kind of midnight follow up, but I thought it wouldn't be effective because as soon as you go, here's it again, you're kind of understanding it a bit more. Even if they don't explain what it is, even if you just get it again, it's like. But I like it just being that one and done thing. And like you said, they didn't actually save the day. They just put it back where they found it. The thing wasn't defeated. If that found more people, it would do the same thing again.
Thing is, we don't know if it's defeated or not. Like, we don't know that it wasn't defeated, nor do we know that it is defeated. Maybe when it transfers consciousness, maybe it transferred consciousness, maybe it just is consciousness. Like I'm with you there. And the fact that I have questions of what is it? How did it get in? Like, the fact I have all those questions just adds to the horror element of this. And often when it comes to Doctor Who, the best episodes are the ones that lean into the horror.
Yeah, well, it's definitely horror.
Well,
like the best thing about the nature of the thing is the thing that many people talk about in relation to like horror movie killers. It's scarier when there's no motive. Like you don't know why the thing is doing what it's doing. Why, if at all, it went after Sky in particular. You get little sort of like clues in the dialogue of why it maybe went after her in particular, but nothing is ever confirmed, and it's much more chilling that way, and there's not an answer to why it does what it does. So.
And it's always that horror thing as well, as like when you raise this big mystery up to a thing, if you see it, it's never going to live up to what you expected. So just by not showing it all the way throughout the entire 45-minute runtime, it keeps it spooky because you're like going, well, what is it? Why do we get any answers? Why do we know what it is? What's going on? And it still ends up being scary all the way through. And now that the episode is 13 years old,
don't do that to me.
And we're still we're still creeped out by it, is a very, very good thing to do.
It's still very much
13 years old.
It is, yes, guys. You make me feel old, Aidan. But no, it's still very much a scary episode, and I like that. I think I find it less scary now than I did when I was younger. Not because of the show itself, but because I think now I'm trying to figure out why everything's happening. Like I'm trying to theorize the alien doing this and this and this and this and this, I'm trying to think about it. And the more I'm thinking about why it's doing what it's doing, it is less scary. And it just summarizes what you guys are saying, basically. If we see it, if we knew more, then it just wouldn't be as scary. Because the point is it's spooky and we don't know much about it. That is the point.
Because even when that guy says, look, do you see that shadow? We never actually see the shadow.
No.
It's not something, even if you zoom in, you go, yeah, there it is. You don't see it. So if we had another second appearance and we had seen even just the shadow, you'd have seen the shape of it and something, and it kind of would have put more image into your head when it's better and you've just got no clue.
It could have been so easy. It could have been so easy for them to just be like the Weeping Angels, just be like, okay, here's a popular new series monster that is easy to sort of like use over and over and over again. Let's just do that, I guess. And they didn't, and that's the best part. So
yeah.
The interesting thing about the shadow is whenever I think back to the shadow in my mind before actually rewatching it, I'd always remember there being a shadow, but there wasn't one. No. So what? Like, and that's again the classic horror element. the human mind is able to create something much scarier than whatever they show you.
Because it'll be, it's that case that human mind's creating it. Because it'll be the case of all three of us probably have a different image of what this thing looked like. If it was to take human, like physical form, we'd probably all think of something different because we'd all be thinking of what is the most scary monster I could possibly think of. And for every single person, that would be something
Sky.
different. What she's just crawling along the roof herself. So, yeah, and I
that
think
whole thing, that whole thing of like seeing like a shadow sort of, or like your mind tricks you into seeing that, like you said, George, is like rooted in reality, especially like when I'm on the job, for example, for people who don't know, I work at a cinema. Sometimes when I'm
on
like,
the job, what is this?
when
I'm on the
job.
beat, or he's a night detective, ladies and gentlemen.
Well, yeah, for people who don't know, I work at a cinema, and sometimes when you have to do a close, you have to like go through the screen rooms when like no one's in there and make sure there's no one like hiding out. And sometimes like for a split second in the corner of my eye, I think I'll see like a shadow on the wall or something, or like a silhouette that's there. I'll turn around and there won't be anyone. You know,
Joel, that's called paranoia. You should probably go see a doctor about that.
No, but like it's the same. It's the same effect as like the mechanic in Midnight. You know, you think you see something, and then you turn around and you get a better look at it, and it's just not there. You know, and it's your mind sort of playing on the paranoia and filling in the blanks.
Yeah, no, if you're on edge, you're gonna think you see something.
Exactly. You know,
and that mechanic was.
Yeah, exactly. You know, like me, you know, like in most instances.
Who's apparently schizophrenic. So
the mechanic really shouldn't have been there with that medical condition, I think. Probably should have been. Yeah. If he's seeing things, it's just no. Maybe there wasn't even a shadow. Maybe there isn't an alien. Maybe isn't an alien. Maybe there isn't a physical form for the alien. That's what I mean.
That's the really pretentious reading, isn't it?
Maybe there wasn't an alien.
It wasn't an alien all the time.
No, there is an alien. No, what I was.
Maybe it was humanity the whole time.
I bet there's somebody out there who's like going, I don't believe there is actually an alien in this story, and he'd be like, shut up. There clearly
Sky's
is.
Sky's just good at hypnosis. That's it. But I think if I had to picture the alien, I don't think it has a physical form. I think the reason it wanted to latch on to the humans is because that's a form for it. Because it mentions how it was in the cold, how it was in the dark, how it was alone. And I think, and how these human bodies are warm, hot, and that kind of thing. I think that's what the alien wants. The alien didn't have a physical form, I don't think. Or if it did, it wasn't a fun one. And what it wanted to do is it wanted a form for it to live, for it to be alive. That's what it wanted. That's what I believe the alien wants. And then it latches on to Sky because Sky's the most scared. And maybe fear is something it feeds off or manipulates. And she was the most scared, so it could latch on. And then it manipulates everyone else's fear because everyone was very scared. And then amplifies their fears. I don't know, using mind control. I don't know what it does. Well, not mind control, mind manipulation. It does that. Then they get more scared and then latches onto the doctor because the doctor's the smartest one there, steals its voice because it's the smartest, and then uses that enhanced power maybe to manipulate everyone else further to push him out. That's how I'm thinking the alien as. That's what I think it is and what it can do. I could be completely wrong, but that's my theory.
It is something similar to I wrote something that manipulates others rather than being an all evil monster. And what I meant by that is, you know, most Doctor Who villains are, I am a monster. This is my evil plan. Come and stop me. I'm going to shoot you. I'm going to attack you. I'm going to take you prisoner. Let's fill out an episode. This one isn't doing that. It's not something with a big plan. It's not something that has been this all overseeing, this is my evil plan, Doctor, come and stop me. It's simply just going, if I make this person think that, and this person think this, all hell is going to break loose. Yep. So I'm just going to say one thing, and then you're all just going to tear each other apart. And that's such a nice thing to see in Doctor Who, where it can just feel like, where are we this week? What is a monster this week? Okay, here we go. The Doctor's just going to point us on a screwdriver. Something's going to blow up. The end. Whereas my very reductionist view of Doctor Who there, but this is something very, very cleverly written, and it's just simply going on the power of suggestion rather than.
I think that sums it up perfectly, really. No matter, like, that just sums up what we've all been saying. Kind of the point is, the people are bad and scared, and they're not the nicest of people. They can be nice, but they're not the nicest. And what the alien does is just pushes them over the edge a bit. So yes, the alien's involved, And I believe without the alien, they wouldn't have gone to that extreme. But they were still bad enough inside, or scared enough, let's say. I don't want to say they're bad, scared enough where that little push was enough to push them to that extreme, you know? So I think I don't want to pin the blame on one person, because I think it is very much an amalgamation of the fear mixed in with the fact the human race can be quite terrible a lot of the times, and the alien is just able to manipulate that. That's it. And I think part of the haunting element, as we've said, leans into the fact we don't see it, but I think it is also what you guys have mentioned earlier. The Doctor doesn't save the day, and that is haunting, because in Doctor Who you always feel when the Doctor's there, you're safe, you're fine, you're gonna be saved, and that's always the thing with Doctor Who. No matter how scared you are, as long as the Doctor's in the same room as you, you're fine. You know, if Peter Capaldi's over there wearing his screwdrivers, he's gonna save the day. But in this episode, as you've said, the Doctor doesn't save the day, and that adds to the fear, because it's like, oh, he can't always be the one to save the day, and that's another layer.
And it ends on quite an interesting note as well, in that, like, you know, most episodes end with, where do you want to go now then, Rose? That's how they usually end. Whereas this one, it actually,
I don't remember that ending.
Yeah, again,
so Rose, where do you want to go?
It's my reductionist view of Doctor Who. But this episode ends with the Doctor actually being quite traumatized and shaken. And that's not really something you ever see. But usually he defeats the monster, he's fine, he can get over it. But here you actually see him quite shaken. And when Donna, when she says "Molto bene" back to him, when he says, "No, don't say that, don't say that," and then that's the credits there, you're like, oh, that's quite a down note to end on. It's not like, come on then, let's get out of here. It's just, no.
The Doctor was so close to death there, and he couldn't. That's not a death where I'm shot, let's regenerate. That's incineration. There's no coming back from that for a Time Lord. So it's not just a death. That's a finite ending to the poor guy.
The stakes and exactly. The stakes and the impacts of the story, though, are so incredibly high when the antagonist is something that can genuinely traumatize the Doctor, the person who, as fans, we've all kind of gravitated towards as someone who's like almost all-knowing, has this like encyclopedic knowledge of everything in the universe, and is always going to save the day. Exactly. And there's always going to like save the day in the end, though. You know, when you introduce an entity that can genuinely shake them, it's impactful. You know, because like, God, this really is bad news at the end of the day. If it can mess them up, you know, then Jesus, you know, like, oh my God, basically.
That's exactly it. Because the Doctor's always fascinated about these aliens, no matter what they are, like the Vashnarada, still fascinated. Everything's fascinating. But with this one, as you're saying, he's traumatized. So it's just, if he's not fascinated by this thing and he now knows more than he did, be scared. But it's it's all just
be very, very afraid is the message, I suppose. But
I do find this way more scary than a classic slasher film, though.
Well, slasher films aren't scary.
No, but what I'm saying is, when it comes to like murderers or that kind of thing, this is more scary because of the mental element.
No, but like I was saying before, the best horror movie monsters or like killers are the ones where, like Midnight, you don't have a clear picture of why they're doing this, you know? Like they're just like the personification of evil, and that kind of effect applies to this like entity almost. You know, you don't know why like it's doing what it is, so it's almost just perceived as pure evil, you know? So
I think we can put an idea on what it does want, with it being wanting a body and all that, because you can look at what it does and what it says.
It's the idea that the end game of this thing is to reach greater society, and we have like no idea what it's gonna do if that happens. You know, like what's the wider impact of this thing reaching like wider society?
It probably would have just gone for a vacation. I'll be honest with you. I made it.
And even that, though, isn't ever said that's what the monster wants. That's just, I think this is what the monster wants.
Yeah.
So we don't even know that for
certain, but I'm not almost certain. But it does say itself that it was it says that it was cold out there and it's warm in here, and you can kind of piece it together that. But
Well,
I'm
it's
not
the
idea
I'm not
behind
saying
this
we know
thing
for
is-
certain, but
yeah, but it's because that's entirely your interpretation of that.
I mean-
because it's so open ended, that's just what you think. But somebody else could say something completely different. Say, well, I don't think
the
that
idea
was-
behind the whole
okay.
thing.
What's your interpretation then, Aidan? Come on.
Well, no, because my interpretation is basically the same as yours.
Yeah.
And I'm saying there
Is
could
Aidan
be
in the
some,
hot seat now?
there could be any old Tom, Dick, or Harry who could say, actually, George, I don't think that's what the plan was.
Well, I don't care about Tom, Dick, nor Harry. I'm
The
kidding.
idea behind it though is that like I said, we don't know why it's doing what it's doing, but there is the possibility. We've seen what it could do to like a small train full of people, and there's the possibility that if it gets what it wants, it could reach like a large population of people. And the fact that we don't know what it would or could do in that situation is terrifying.
Yeah.
You know, so we can't allow it to happen, really, which is just so effective. You know, on the whole, like once again, it all just we keep going over this point, but it all just relates to the fact that it's so much more impactful. The fact that we don't know what it is.
Yes.
So,
as we coming to the end, so we can do our final thoughts in a moment. But I think as we are, without trying to sound like I'm being really pretentious, but as we are like we all know each other because of film production, filmmaking connections. If we move away just from plot about the episode for a purely practicality way, we've mentioned how they did it with the teleprompter and things. What are our thoughts on that? George, you said you had some thoughts on David Tennant's performance. You can talk about that and just making it in a one
no, I get you.
setting as well.
Well, I think a lot of this takes inspiration from theatre, actually, rather than filmmaking. It's one location. It's an acting masterclass, really. If you're trying to learn how to act, watch this, because it's purely acting when it comes to why the characters are so good, because there's no big monster, as we've said. It's the acting that sets it apart from the rest of Doctor Who, really, I think, and obviously the writing, but you get what I'm saying. But I think I forgot her name again, sorry, but the person who plays Sky, she's an incredible
Leslie Sharp.
Leslie Sharp, thank you. I'm terrible with actors' names unless it's David Tennant, but Leslie Sharp, she's vital in this by creating such a, first, as I've said, a warming character who kind of you're warm to a little bit cold, but you're warm to it. And then suddenly she's this cold, as if she's not there. It's almost zombie-like in a sense. Like when you see zombie films, the person you knew is no longer there anymore. They're gone. Body snatchers, basically. That's what this is. It's a Return of the Body Snatchers, basically. It's one of those. It's a classic idea, but she's brilliant, and her portrayal is wonderful, and the amount of effort her and David had to put in to make this work is ludicrous. Like those scenes where they're together, there's no film magic to get around that when they're talking directly to each other. That is just those two going at it for hours to get those lines right. The behind the scenes, as you mentioned earlier with Doctor Who Confidential, is brilliant, and seeing how hard those two worked is it's a testament to them, because it makes that scene it is brilliant. Like with the pie thing, they had to learn that. There's no reading there's no reading a teleprompter for that. They had to learn pi to like 20 digits or whatever it is.
It was 30 decimals actually.
30 decimals. There you go. They had to do that one small bit there, and that's all for the horror, and they weren't copying each other. They both had to learn that separately and then say it together and get those mannerisms. And what Leslie Sharp had to do is learn everyone's mannerisms. That's a feat within itself. Like that's a feat, learning a mannerism and then learning the lines and then acting it. And it's like so many layers to her performance. And then David has to be the other side of that, have to be fascinated by this without making it seem fake, treat it as if it's this completely alien thing and be fascinated by the fact that Leslie is sitting there reciting pi. And it's brilliant. I love it so much. And the other characters maybe want to hit them, and that's a testament to them.
Yeah, there's a lot of dimensions to David Tennant's performance that is like completely an encounter to Leslie Sharp's in there, and in, like you said in the beginning, there is this sort of like classic Doctor innate fascination in what this thing is, which then over time develops into more desperation as he realizes he's struggling to contain the fright and the panic of like the other passengers, which then develops into fear, you know, when he realizes that this thing is latching onto him in particular, ultimately in like trauma, you know, by the end, when the thing is like taking his voice, you know, like the look, that shot of like the sort of complete utter fear and trauma in his eyes as he's like being forced to say these words, you know, is just always gonna, exactly, that shot or those shots of like David Tennant are always gonna stick with me as a viewer, just because of just how frightening they are and how simple they are, you know. And there's just a lot. It's so interesting to see like David like looking at the situation, understanding what the Doctor would do, and then trying to portray how this situation is different and how it would affect the Doctor differently, you know. It's perfect.
Leslie...
my favorite of them was the bit where, again, their face, like George was saying, when they're both facing each other, and yes, they could have spliced in, done 2 separate shots, but I don't think they did.
No,
it looked, you know, it was live.
My
favorite one is the one where she then overtakes him, and it's a really subtle thing that if you're not paying really close attention, it's not till the end when then she says the sentence before the Doctor says the sentence. As that goes along, and they gradually just go from talking at the same time to then Sky talking first. I loved that bit because it was like, and if you're not paying attention, you wouldn't notice that. But when you're watching it, you're like, that is so cleverly done for the director, for David and for Leslie to try and get that right, to make sure that they've gone from talking at the same time to then her talking first and the Doctor repeating. That is so cleverly done, and that was my favorite of them.
And Leslie Sharp even said in an interview with Confidential that it was just a process of like sitting down with David and doing it again and again and again and again, like the long like square root of pi, and the trying to like sync up gradually so they were on point with each other. It was literally a process of just like doing it again and again and again until they got it right, you know. And that's why it works best in the end, because it is real.
Rose Tyler, Martha Jones, Donna Noble.
Donna Noble TARDIS, exactly. Yeah.
Could have named some other companions.
Yeah, it's like it's a big middle finger to all the other companions, isn't it? Mickey, Jack, none of these people get a mention.
I just like the new ones. That's what David's saying there.
Yeah.
But basically it's just Leslie is responsible for making Leslie is responsible for making it scary and making the alien what it is. And like giving us that kind of the bad guy basically, but David is responsible for making us be scared. You get what I'm saying? Because usually, as I've said, if the Doctor's in control, you know you're going to be fine. Something can be scary, but you're going to be fine. But we see, as you've said, Joel, the Doctor lose that control to a realization where this is a problem. It's basically the Doctor is a parallel to what the audience would feel when watching it, what we do feel, or how I felt at the very least. You watch it, and as he loses control, you get more scared, or at least you feel more uncomfortable, because it's like, how's he going to get out of this? Because the one person really who you know would save him right now is at a swimming pool.
Yeah. Obviously, Donna's not in it for sheer practicality and scheduling reasons, but if she was, it wouldn't have worked, because like you said earlier, George, like if it was a case of, shall we throw the Doctor out, it'd have been, oi, no, he's not going anywhere, and it'd been like, well, it ruins it. But with the Doctor on his own, it works.
Donna probably would have just slapped Sky, just stop it.
I think the fact that it is a companion light story like works in its benefit, that it is very much just a bottle episode that can just be viewed by itself. It's not really part of like an overarching thing. You don't really need to know that much about the other characters. It works best if like you go in not really knowing much about the Doctor, because that's where a lot of the uncertainty comes from. I would
disagree with that one bit there. I'd say it works better knowing that the Doctor will always save the day, because then him not saving the day is scarier.
Do you know what I mean? As a viewer,
but I know I get what you mean. But just
as a viewer, if you don't know a lot about the Doctor, it sort of like makes it a bit more like,
who's this idiot?
Yeah, exactly. When the other passengers start to question who he is, it works a lot better as a viewer, because you start to have a bit of an introspective moment, like, wait, I also don't know much about this person who I've latched onto. You know, like that. It's quite interesting in that sense. Like I'd say the only thing I don't like about the episode, like I said, it works best when it's just completely standalone. and it works as a bottle episode. So the only thing that doesn't work about it for me is the Rose Tyler inclusion. It's fleeting, but it's that moment where like the screen comes up and like you see the bit that's been showing throughout series 4 of like Rose Tyler trying to contact the Doctor. That dates it a bit, I think, because if you were just to sit down and watch the episode by itself and Rose Tyler appears, it's like, oh well, like this doesn't have anything to do with what's going on.
I think it's important that we see that in like the rest of the episodes for obviously the overarching Rose Tyler coming back. It's important that for that, but in this episode, I would have preferred it not be there, because I do agree with you. It does take you out of it for a second. It's kind of like that's jarring. It ruins. It doesn't ruin the pacing, but it's a good stop. Let's go again kind of thing. And
it's the fact that go on. Sorry,
I say it's something that compared to Blink again though. I always see people. I've always seen the things like, what would be the one episode you had to show somebody to introduce them to Doctor Who? And I always see Blink on that list. And I've always disagreed with that, because it's a great episode, of course, but there's no Doctor really in it. And it's not doing the Doctor doing his typical things. I think this would be a much better introduction. Even though you've got not got the companion dynamic, you still got the Doctor kind of pushing to wits end, showing basically what he's about and that kind of thing. I think this is much better than Blink. And I think if this was your first episode that you were seeing, and when Rose appears in the background, it is only while he's talking. So if you were just looking at the Doctor and you could just see Rose on the screen, I think if it was your first introduction, you'd kind of just assume that was just the TV glitching, and you wouldn't really.
Who's that?
Because it goes from Rafaela Cara singing "Do It Again" to then just being Rose, and then it kind of goes off. So I think you would just assume that's just the TV being weird. Only then when you get the context of, hold on, I know that blonde woman, it'd be like, that's when it makes sense.
I agree with you when you say this would be a better introduction than Blink. I agree with you there. I don't think this would be the best introduction to Doctor Who though, because of the way you don't have this Doctor who can save the day. Like obviously we know he can, and we know he usually does, but in this he doesn't. And I don't think that's the best introduction as the Doctor as a character. You get all of these elements of him being able to figure it out, and that's important, but you don't see him be the savior. And I think that's an important part of that character, actually. So I don't think this would be the best introduction to the Doctor. No, better than Blink, but not the best.
Yeah, same. It's not the episode I'd choose to introduce.
And I think that's.
So I'm more likely to choose this than Blink.
And I think that's part of a reason why I really like this episode, but it's not my favorite episode, because the Doctor isn't the one saving the day. And that's, I know it's a bit cliche, the good guy saves the day, but it's a part of why I love Doctor Who, seeing that. Exactly. It's like with Batman. I love seeing Batman save the day, and that's brilliant. And in like a medium where I'm following like a Robin or something. Well, actually, no, if I just follow Batman and he doesn't save the day and he's just saved by happenstance, it's cool and it's a nice different take, and it's usually very good, but it's not my favorite. It's not my favorite. So that's probably part of a reason. That is probably the reason why this isn't my favorite. And I do prefer, when it comes to favorites, School Reunion, because that's just kind of the Doctor Who being the Doctor, that's just, he figures it out, he saves the day. K9 does a spin and Tom Baker gets annoyed at the dog. It's all great.
But to wrap this all up then, as Joel has said, it's his favorite episode. So I will go around rankings here, but I'm going to start with George here, because George has notoriously said that he doesn't give anything a 10 out of 10. Is this a 10 out of 10, or are you still going to say no?
I mean, I just, when it comes to 10 out of 10, it's got to be perfect. It really has to be. And with this, there aren't any negatives that are a bad thing. Like if I were to think of something I prefer,
we've not said a negative point.
Like, this is the thing with Doctor Who, as I've said, I prefer it when the Doctor saves the day, and that's great and all. But for this episode, if the Doctor saved the day, it wouldn't be the same episode and it would not be as good. So that point is completely moot. That doesn't work. So I will have to say that this is a 10 out of 10 Doctor Who episode, because no matter what bad point there is, if I try and change this to anything else, I'm fundamentally making it not what it is, and then it would be worse. So if I can't make this better, then for me it's a 10 out of 10.
Well, that's a first. I've never heard that before.
Making big moves at the moment.
Yeah. So obviously I'm going to go to you, Joel, and say, is it 10 out of 10?
I'd say, like I said, when the only negative I can come up with is the fact that it has like a 2-second Rose Tyler cameo that I can easily overlook. When that is the
Which
only
is
negative.
needed for the rest of the series.
Yeah, but if you were to
Yeah.
look at the episode by itself, it's not really like needed, you know. Like when that's the only negative though, and it's something that only lasts for 2 seconds in a 46-minute episode, and I can easily overlook it. It's got to be a 10 out of 10. When I can literally look at a story and see nothing wrong with it at all in its execution, you know, it's flawless to me. And like I said, it's my favorite episode. Unless I said I hate Doctor Who, and this happens to be my favorite episode of a show I hate, it's like it's got to be a 10 out of 10, you know, because like. I love this show at the end of the day, and for me to put this in such high regard, I couldn't give it any less than a 10 out of 10. So,
I mean, I'm going to follow suit and also say it is a 10 out of 10.
Coward.
This is of all the podcasts I've done, and I've done something like 50 now or something ridiculous like that. This is the first one I've ever done where I haven't written a single negative note. The very first one where not a single. I always do my plus and minuses, so there's not a single minus on here. So it is. You know, we're really kicking off series 2-ish with
this is our Christmas
like a real standout episode.
Yeah.
It is just
our recorded in
Brilliant.
August Christmas special.
a recording, yes. Yes. So that's that then, as far as I'm concerned. Thank you very much, Joel, for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm glad we're able to come to a shared consensus on this masterpiece of an episode.
Is there anything you'd like to plug? Anything you'd like to shout out?
Probably in the description of this there'll be my YouTube channel, which is like the only thing I really want to promote, which I don't post content regularly, but there is a short film on there that I released not so long ago, like my first ever short film that I would like to promote. It's called My Following. It was a long time coming in terms of me being able to make it, so
it's
I
very
really
good.
appreciate.
I've seen it. It's very good.
Thank you so much. I appreciate anyone listening to this going over to that channel and giving it a watch, sending it some love if you like it. That's the main thing. My Following short film on my YouTube channel.
You can plug your Twitter as well, Joel, because that's very Doctor Who heavy.
Twitter at PaulieH2. I tweet something every now and again nowadays. But yeah, I usually steer more towards like Doctor related content on there. Like that's where it got its start really. So check that out if you fancy. That'll probably be in the description as well. But yeah, thank you very much.
Now me and Aidan are going to plug ourselves.
Yes.
Well, we'll plug our Twitter because we don't usually shout out, but it's at Ellis Gula Media on Twitter. And what's the Instagram?
EDW_podcast.
That's that. Come and visit us.
And then obviously with what we've been doing for the past few months, because we haven't recorded Exterminating Doctor Who for 3 months, what we've been doing in the meantime is, George,
A Night with the Dark Knight.
Yes.
Something I've been hosting where we just look at Batman through the ages for better or for worse. Usually for the better, apart from when we did Batman Forever and then we wanted to die.
Don't talk about that one. So yes, that's all our promotions. So I can say that's Midnight completed.
I thought you were about to say that's Doctor Who Exterminated. I was going to cringe.
No, what I was about to say was we'll join us next week, same bat time, same bat channel. I thought that's the wrong podcast. That's why that went really awkward there. So yeah, thank you for listening.
Thank you very much for listening.
And
Thanks,
goodbye.
guys.
Bye-bye. Oh, why is this happening?